Good evening, everybody. Tonight's bond meeting is to discuss a potential rezoning that's being requested off of Highway 46 or River Road in front of Champion Heights. I think probably most of you on here are familiar with the project. Mr. Pedrati, who is one of the owners of the property, met with a lot of the Champion Heights folks. It's probably been a month and a half ago to discuss the potential zoning and what their plans were for the property. The property in question is about 22 acres. Just to give you a little background and history, the property was zoned B2, which was highway commercial, until fairly recently, last year actually, with the Unified Development Code. The city went through and rezoned all properties in the city. That included residential, all commercial got rezoned. So all the B districts, which were the commercial zonings, were changed to Cs. In this case, when we looked at the zonings, we changed the B2, the highway commercial, which was least restrictive. In other words, it allowed the most uses at the time. We changed it to a C2 due to the proximity and adjacency to residential, the Champion Heights neighborhood. The property owner, though, is asking to come back and look at this again. The B2, which was the previous zoning, is like a C4 now. That's what we call, that's our highway commercial, but highway commercial truly is that's along I-10. What he's requesting is a C3, which you typically would find along thoroughfares, which is River Road or Highway 46, that are not adjacent to residential neighborhoods. That is the request. Tonight's bond meeting, we've got Mr. Pedrati is with us. And I see Delaney, who is the representing attorney. I don't see any other representatives, Dan. What we'll do is we'll allow Dan to talk about his project, what he's planning for the site. Staff is here to answer any questions that might come up regarding zoning or some specifics, but really this is more about the community having a conversation with the developer, trying to find out what's going on, trying to find out what they're proposing, and just allowing conversation back and forth. What we do is we'll allow Mr. Pedrati or Delaney, whoever's going to do the speaking tonight, or both, talk and describe the project. I see Russell Yeager as well. Russell Yeager is their engineer for the site. I know there were a lot of questions with the previous meeting that Dan had put together and Delaney's group had put together and to talk to the Champion Heights folks. There were questions about drainage and so forth. So I assume that's why Russell is here to answer those questions. And then Dan and Delaney can answer any other questions, but we'll let them explain the project first. And then I'll come back, we'll open it up for questions, and one at a time, we'll talk back and forth, give them a chance to answer any questions. If staff can help with any questions, we will, but otherwise this is really more of a conversation for the community and the developer. And so let's get started. Dan, you want to explain the project, or did you want Delaney to open?
First of all, thanks everybody for being here. I want to clarify one quick thing. I'm not an owner of the property. I'm working with a partner of mine who owns the property outright, and he and I've done another number of things in and around Bernie and elsewhere.
Thank you.
But I want to be clear, I'm not the property owner. I'm working with and for him. Gotcha. But I also wanted to say, Laura, that I'd like to defer to Delaney to introduce our comments, and Great. Then Russell.
Great.
Perfect. Sarah, is there any way that I can share my screen?
I think so. Let me see here.
Yeah, Laura would allow that.
Okay, perfect. I couldn't remember who was
able to do
Laura it last time.
Hold on one second. Let me get there. Sorry, technically challenged today. I don't see the share screen, Sarah.
Be right there.
I should have left Sarah in charge of all this.
I'll jump into a little bit of an overview before we get into everything. So thank you so much, Laura, for the introduction. I work with Killing Griffin and Fairmont. We represent the property owner. We also have Dan Pedrati, who is helping with the property owner, and then Russell Yeager, who is the engineer on the project. He's reviewed this project for lots and lots of months. Okay, perfect. I think I have share screen now.
Okay, thank you. All yours, Delaney. You may have to pass it back to me when you're done, but I
Okay.
think we got you set up.
Walk me through that. Okay, perfect. Do you guys see the exhibit?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay, so this is an aerial of the property. If any of you guys were at the library meeting, you've already seen this exhibit, but this is basically what the property looks like right now. It is both portions of the, both portions that are shown here, split Champion Heights Boulevard. It is currently zoned C2. We are requesting C3. Like Laura mentioned, the property was previously zoned B2, which is now pretty equivalent to B4 or C4. We are requesting a zoning change to allow for more applicable uses to people that to have in their backyard, like a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods. Although grocery stores are allowed under C2, they are effectively limited, given that they are not allowed, no building in C2 is allowed to have a building footprint over 12,000 feet. Trader Joe's and Whole Foods are larger than that. It sounds like a lot of square feet, but even a Walgreens or a CVS is bigger than that. So just kind of give you like a size equivalent. Jumping further, a portion of the property was annexed into the city of Boerne in 2005, which is when it was given the B2 zoning. In 2009, the property was fully annexed and zoned B2. The development of all the houses in Woods of Boerne and Champion Heights started in 2014. It was later completed, and now you see what the property looks like today. I know a lot of the concerns from the last meeting were about drainage and traffic, which is why we have Russell on here. Like I said, he has spent several months evaluating the site. And this time I'm going to pass it over to him to kind of give a broader overview of addressing any of y'all's concerns and questions, which I think I have to stop sharing for.
Also, just before you get started, let me add a couple of quick comments. One, the reason why the property was, first of all, the Champion Heights property and this commercial property were all done under the same owner. In fact, the Champion Heights zoning was put in place at the same time as the B2 zoning on the front of it. It was all one process, working very closely with staff and city and the forefathers. The notion that there needed to be a commercial hub to provide some way to spread traffic in Boerne from an east sort of commercial hub area, and then leave the west commercial. Obviously, we can't change the Main Street and or where the HEB is now and that whole commercial area over there. But the intent was to make sure that there was that the things that you need in your daily life, the necessities like groceries, were available on the east side of town to help folks on that side of town as the east side emerges with fighting that traffic all the way back over towards I-10. So there was a very good thought in place at the time. There was a dedication of a substantial right of way in the commercial tract to accommodate this. And there were all the decisions were in place back in 2009, 2005 to 2009, as we worked with staff to get this thing zoned properly. I was involved in that process then. All of this predates both the Woods of Boerne and Champion Heights, as Delaney pointed out. But I just want to make sure that in the right context that the thought process back then was we need to have a commercial hub out on the east side to help mitigate the traffic through the center of town. And because all of us have to go now through River Road in front of the Dodging Duck, between that and the Cibolo, where it's necessarily 2 lanes of traffic. So that was the point.
And we do have a land use plan. We talked about this at the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We've got a land use plan in place, and that's why it does show commercial along this area along River Road. And it was to kind of spread that out somewhat to allow some commercial that would serve the residential on this end of town, you know, still kind of having a core closer to I-10. So that's kind of what Dan's talking about. We do have a land use plan in place. We have a thoroughfare plan. We went over this at the last P&Z meeting, showing how it all kind of works together on this side of town. And it gets built with development. So currently though, they have commercial zoning in place. The question really is more about, you know, what types of uses should be here. The main difference really between the C2 and the C3, besides building square footage, which I know is really, I think is their focus, is that there are a lot more uses in the C3, but most of those additional uses between a C2 and a C3 do require a special use permit. So what that means, just for everybody to understand, the special use permit is like going through a zoning process all over again. And it locks in how structures can be, well, not how they're built, but you know, how they're positioned and heights and setbacks. And there are conditions that can be placed on special use permits. So that between the C2 and C3, as far as uses, that's really the main difference. There are a lot more allowed, but with special use permits. So I think basically bottom line, the difference between the uses, that's the difference. You have a little more say in the other, but then the others are permitted, just with exceptions. So Russell, I know a lot of the questions at the community meeting that y'all held were about drainage and detention. There is detention over there, and you've got the creek just on the other side. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and traffic?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Laura. And yeah, like they've said, my name is Russell Yeager. I'm a professional engineer with WGI, which is a firm that's local here to the San Antonio and Boerne region. I actually live not too far from the neighborhood here, so I'm very familiar with kind of the issues of the area. I was going to start with talking about some of the transportation. As you've already heard, the site's gone from B2 to C2, and we're asking for C3. And we have looked and studied a number of different options for the type of impact that development here would have on transportation, and really whether it's the original B2 or this request of C3 or what we're at zoning wise now, the amount of transportation impact is almost the same through each of those stages. It really depends on what the final users are, but as far as the total impact, it's really very similar. And in order to make sure that we mitigate that, if you studied the major thoroughfare plan, or what we talked about when I was there at the previous meeting, is this development is going to be looking at expanding the transportation options for the neighborhood. We're going to be expanding the entranceway onto 46, ensuring that that's a safe entranceway. We're also going to be connecting some cross connections so that you're going to actually expand the number of connections to 46. Make sure that we can get you east and west to other opportunities to connect to Highway 46. And we'll have to study all of that as we develop the project, but those connections are already regulated and requested by the major thoroughfare plan. So those will be installed when this development goes in, which should alleviate a lot of the transportation issues from in and out of the neighborhood. And because the neighborhood itself doesn't have outlets into other areas, the transportation impact is really going to be situated from that commercial development down into Highway 46. And that's why we're focusing on expanding the infrastructure there within that area to make sure that we solve some of those issues for you and expand the transportation as a part of this development. So that on the transportation side is something that the Boerne Code asks us to do, is study that and provide options to ensure that we make transportation or solve some of those transportation impacts we may have. That's part of the city's request as we move forward with that. I'm going to hit drainage really quick, and then obviously I'm sure you guys may have some questions, so we'll move on to that. But we talked a lot about drainage at the last meeting. I know some of you may not have been in attendance, but in order to try and help with that, we also sent out an exhibit. I believe Delaney sent out to the HOA and some of the members of the team that were at the previous meeting. So I think I can share, but I want to show that in case you guys haven't seen it.
I may have to make you host. Let me see. Oh, no.
I think it worked. So a couple of things I just wanted to bring up is both city, county, state, all the requirements require us as an engineer to study this very closely and ensure that we make no drainage impact on anything upstream or downstream of our development. And one of the things we wanted to show is that currently the development that we're working with is significantly lower than even the closest home in Champion Heights. So you can see here, it's a cross section. I know it's maybe a little hard to see depending on the size of your screen if you're on a phone or something, but we're happy to send this out to anybody that's on this call again. But what we wanted to show here is that we're significantly downstream of any of the homes that are there in Champion Heights. The development that we're looking at is at a minimum, 10 or 15 feet, 10 feet minimum, but as low as 15 feet below where the homes are today. So, small impacts or fill that we're going to do on our side is not going to be able to push water upstream into any of the homes. Additionally, even that closest home is 8 feet above the elevation of Highway 46. And, the water currently goes under Highway 46, and we certainly wouldn't be able to develop anything that would cause it to flow over 46. But even if it were able to do that, it would still be significantly below the homes in Champion Heights. So, our
Below,
requirement.
Russell, you mean by elevation, right?
Correct. Yeah. So, our requirement from the state, my requirement as an engineer is that I can't impact any of these things. And so there is not a development that we could design that would create an impact on any of the homes in Champion Heights that wouldn't also create an impact on other things that the city, state, and county would regulate us from changing. So we have to mitigate that. That's the intention of a detention pond or other efforts we would have to make on the floodplain so that we didn't impact any homes. So I wanted to send this to you guys to show you why we believe we can develop without making an impact. But obviously, if you have questions about this, I'm happy to answer those. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it back over to Delaney and Dan and any questions that you guys have.
So Dan, did you want to add anything to it before I open it up to questions?
Yes, please. One of the other, there were actually three things that we heard loud and clear from the nearly I think it was just over 70 folks that came and took time out of their day to visit with us at the library. I want to say two things. One, if we need to have additional conversation and such, I understand that Champion Heights has established a subcommittee that's really focused on land use changes in and around Champion Heights. We'd be delighted to sit down and meet with those folks. But while we're thinking about that, I want to make sure everybody recognizes, in case you didn't get the letter, that we heard loud and clear, please, 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 please don't chase apartments, don't bring apartments, don't do apartments. So we have we are now on the record saying that we will not build that garden style 2- and 3-story walk-up apartment stuff on this property, like you see across the street next to the Valero station and elsewhere in town. We could under C3, actually under C2 as well, pursue that under a special use permit, but we're not going to. We will, the way those things work is a restriction, like Laura, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way those things typically work is something like a homeowners association is what's called the beneficial interest holder. And so that restriction that would go on this piece of property would be held by, say, the Champion Heights HOA or some other organization like that. And as the benefit,
I've heard of that. I've not seen anybody that's done it just because it's complicated, but there is a way to do it.
There's, and it's not, what I'm trying to say, and Laura can confirm, is this is not just flapjaw. This is not just fast talk. This is, in fact, a public statement that we will do in front of council and planning and zoning commission and anybody else that says that we're not going to build traditional, any of that apartment, garden style apartments. There's always a possibility that we ask for some residential above retail or some of those other cool sort of ideas, but we're restricting against the traditional garden style apartments.
Gotcha.
Delaney, did I miss anything?
No, I think you addressed everything. Just to kind of touch on your point, the city usually can't regulate what you had just mentioned about the apartments. We would enter into restrictive covenants with Champion Heights or Woods of Bernie, and Champion Heights and Woods of Bernie's HOA would effectively have the right to regulate that. So if they had any concerns with their coming in and someone developing a multifamily apartment complex, which we would be limiting against, Champion Heights and Woods of Bernie would be the ones who could go and fight that. So they would directly have a hand in the property. But other than that, I think you and Russell did a really good job of kind of summing up everything, and I'm comfortable with opening it up to questions at this time.
Great. So is there anybody that's on that would like to ask a question?
Yes, Laura, this is, I already did. This is Guy Atherton. I'm also here with Charlie King. He's the president of the Champion Heights HOA, and Tony von Fraunhofer and Susan von Fraunhofer, or Susan Lake, I'm sorry. We're part of the subcommittee here at Champion Heights. And so we're all kind of sitting at the same computer. I probably show Susan Lake right now. So
Joseph Fraunhofer.
yes,
Yeah.
But we've got Susan's name as well. That's great. Thank you.
and yeah, and then Charlie King.
I've got it.
So a couple quick things, just that I kind of want to at least ask and have a correction. We have a number of questions, but first, the Thoroughfare Plan. And thank you, Mr. Pedrati, for coming again. We really, truly appreciate you reaching out to us. One thing that we've been battling with the other project as well is this crossroad temporarily. We understand and accept that commercial is going to go here, at least most people do. However, our big concern is, funneling that traffic across towards Woods of Bernie, because at the time there is no complete or ability to complete the northern stretch. And I know, Laura, I've asked that question of you quite a few times, and for the simple reason of the Ritterman property and then also the storage property. So I just want to make sure that unless there's been any developments there, because that is one of our major concerns, as I'm sure you guys have heard, in addition to the drainage, is the traffic. So I think that's going to be a little painful. So we might ask, to consider getting that built ahead of time, if there's any possibility to do that. The east-west, yeah. Just to help alleviate that traffic.
This is, can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
This is what you're talking about. So here's Woods of Bernie. This comes across Champion Heights.
Yep.
This is the proposed zoning. And
Right.
then now we do show a primary collector that connects to River Road on, now this is the proposed apartments.
Yep.
This is the proposed commercial.
Mhm.
There's some confusion between the two, and it's just because everything's happening at one time over here. But
Mhm.
this connection over here should go all the way through and potentially end in Esperanza. This is the section that's in question for us as to whether or not we can ever make that connection. But
Mhm.
for now, this is very obviously, this has been done, and this would be very likely. Whether or not it ends here or not, we're not sure.
Okay.
So that's what he's talking about.
I do have a quick question. I guess this would probably be towards Mr. Pedrati or Delaney. Do you guys plan to build the entire lot on both sides, meaning you're not going to sell any of that property? Yes.
I'm trying to unmute here. I represent the landowner, and exactly precisely how this proceeds from here, I can't tell you that. I not because I don't want to, but because I don't know. There is a lot of interest in Bernie, as we all know, and on this side of town, because of the lack of commercial development, there's a lot of interest in commercial development on this side of town. He'll have to make that decision going down the road. I'm not going to shine you on and say that we have the crystal ball and we're ready to rock and roll, because that's just not where we are right now.
Mhm.
We're trying to fix something that we're not trying to get all, as we've all said, we're not trying to get all the way back to B2 like we were just 6 months ago, by the way. We're trying to get back, what is responsive to the way this part of town is developing today. And again, I keep saying grocery store. Those smaller format, these are not HEBs. There's not going to be an HEB on this property. It doesn't have the dimensions that HEB requires. So they're not going to have a massive HEB traffic jam situation here. But a Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, those are about 18,000 square feet. And I guess, Laura, the big HEB in Bernie's probably 60,000 square feet.
118.
No,
118?
Yeah, I looked it up the other day. I did quite a bit of research on this. I was looking at the footprints.
So we aren't going to be that. We're not doing that. But the ability to go, buy dinner for tonight and stock up on typical things. I mean, we know it at Trader Joe's. Is everybody kind of getting a sense of that place? Whole Foods. I don't personally shop at either of those. I'm a very committed HEB guy, but this is not that. And to me, the ability to I personally think that from a lifestyle from Champion Heights in the woods of Bernie, having a grocery store nearby is going to be wonderful, because I don't have to even think about going through traffic lights and all the rest of the nonsense I do now to get to HEB. Anyway, that's just kind of our take on it. And I want to be real clear that C2 and C3 don't really have it's not a meaningful difference in traffic count. And the primary difference is that a 12,000 square footprint building disallows a whole bunch of things that would be really convenient to have nearby.
And just to kind of piggyback off of that, with any concern about the property being sold, the main difference, but any differences that are between C2 and C3, most of them require an S. So if someone was to buy the property and wanted to develop it, in most cases, they will have to come and do all of this again. They will have to have conversations with the neighborhoods again. They will have to go to Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council prior to it getting approved. So you will get another say if, say, the property was to sell. I'm not saying it is going to, but you would get a say in it again.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the reason behind mine is, we say, okay, we're not going to build, apartments, but let's say that you sold off the property, a portion of the property closest to Champion Heights, and all of a sudden somebody wants to come in, and then we have to fight that battle again. So I think that just makes us potentially feel a little more comfortable if you're planning on doing the whole thing, and whether it's a PDD or however they do that and arrange a setup for what is going to be built there. Do y'all mind if I just ask some more questions, or would you like me to?
No, that's what
Okay.
it's about. There's
Okay.
plenty of time for everybody.
Okay. I guess you kind of committed to no apartments, or at least a traditional garden style apartment. Do you have any, obviously you don't have any firm commitments, but are you truly getting interest from something like, let's say, a Sprouts, a Trader Joe's, or a Whole Foods, versus a lot of the big concern is something like a CVS, which would be 24 hours. You got a lot of light, you got a lot of people coming in there, and being that we're not gated, you have a lot of people lingering around at all hours, moseying around doing stuff that maybe shouldn't be done. Do you have some serious interest, or can you even allude to in it that with those mentioned larger box stores type of setups?
I can tell you faithfully that we have a bona fide interest from, I'm going to say, a developer that works with specifically Trader Joe's and Whole Foods.
Okay.
Whole Foods.
Okay. Let me see here, and pardon me. Yeah. Yeah, I'm assuming you guys are kind of referring to both the east and the west side, correct? This property, is that fair to assume that that's both sides? Do you have a vision that you could share with us of this property at this point? Like if you had everything in a perfect world in your eyes, what would it look like? How would it present to the people pulling into the neighborhood? You know, people want to be proud when they pull in. They don't want to be the place that's stuck behind a car dealership or whatever it might be. I don't know. You know, they want to look at it and say, hey, this is somewhere that we're happy to live. Do you have that vision yet?
We haven't gone into the site planning process. One of the reasons why is because of development interests that we have had conversations with. We don't know if we're going to end up at C2 or C3. And so it has such a, I mean, for instance, a whole bunch of smaller buildings or a few larger buildings. In the long run, a few larger buildings actually can be arranged better from a drainage standpoint, from a landscaping standpoint, from et cetera, less parking or at least better defined parking than we think than what can be done with a bunch of small buildings. So, but I can't answer the question as directly as you're asking it. I'm not trying to
I understand.
dance around it.
Along that same line, then, are you getting other interest from, let's say, larger box stores that this C3 could allow something like that? I'm not sure that we really want there, maybe like an academy. We've heard rumors that they want to come out this way, and that would increase traffic dramatically.
This property doesn't have the dimensions that those type of stores, you know, a Target, an Academy, one of what we all refer to as the big box stores, just like the HEB. Those are all 60, 70, 80,000 square foot buildings and up. There's none of those are going to fit on this property. What we're really, it's going to be a smaller format grocery store is probably going to be the most intense. I mean, I'm trying to be very careful and not make statements or promises that, you know, might change, but I can tell you that dimensionally, and Laura can speak to this too. I mean, those big box stores won't fit on this property.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I get it. You know, there's a little bit of chicken and egg, you know, which came first here that you got to deal with. I think overall, you know, a lot of it is about the presentation, just how it looks as you come in is important. We want it to look and fit and be Bernie. One question with a couple of people that are along that would be backing up to this, your neighbors that are literally looking out towards the front of this property, their backyards are delivery trucks, dumpsters. Along with those comes raccoons, possums, cats, and stink. Is there a way to move that to the sides so that it's not, you know, these people are sitting in their backyard enjoying a nice summer night and they're not smelling trash? Is there a way to plan that in such a manner that you get away with that?
You might speak to this too, Laura, but that's all sort of worked out in the site planning and actual development plan approval process.
It
More
is.
so than at the zoning level.
Right. And I will tell you, I mean, you talk about Bernie looking like Bernie. We absolutely, and I think everybody here agrees, Bernie is an attractive little town, and anything new that's been built lately, I think everybody would agree has been attractive. And it's because we have design regulations in place. So whether Dan likes it or not, we're going to make it attractive. I know he doesn't think that way. He wants it to be attractive, but it's in our regulations and it has certain design criteria they have to meet. As far as dumpsters and so forth, what we require is screening and blocking. I think because it does back up to residential, we'll have to take some of that into consideration. And HEB would be a good example, whereas normally we wouldn't allow dumpsters and so forth up along the road or detention along the road because it's just not attractive, or there are bays along the road. But in HEB's using them as an example of somebody we had to work with because they butt right up against residential. We had to take that into consideration in development of their site and allow them to move dumpsters away and put their truck bays along the street, but then we made them screen it so you can't really see it very well, and landscaping and all of that. Even their detention is attractive for detention. And it's because we work with them on it. So we do look at that, but it's a case by case basis, but we do take that into consideration when you're abutting residential and you've got commercial, especially in this case, because they'll have Woods of Bernie on one side and Champion Heights on the other. So we'll have to look at that as far as positioning of dumpsters and put them on the other side of the building, maybe closer to the building and away from residential, and then just screen it heavily with landscaping and so forth.
Okay, that was part of one of the questions I know, and I know Woods of Bernie shares this concern besides traffic, because it's going to be going over their way as well, but is that vegetation barrier. I know we mentioned that at the meeting at the library, was having some sort of barrier, whatever those trees may be that can help maybe buffer a little bit of sound, maybe a little bit of light shining directly into the residents that are going to be sharing that land. I do have one other question. Would you be willing to take over the detention pond that sits on that piece of property? This is a detention pond. Yes, there's a continuing argument whether it's a detention or a retention pond.
It's
The pond that sits up front that will be on that property. Would they, as the developer, be willing to take that over?
Russell, I'm going to defer to the engineer on that because there is a pretty good answer to that question.
So when we design our project, we'll have to put in detention for our project as well. So, having an opportunity to potentially combine them or work together with you guys is certainly an option for us. As far as maintenance wise, I hadn't talked to the owner about that, so I don't want to commit to that, but I think it's certainly something from a site planning perspective we can look into, and I think would be a good option for us to look at as a combined idea of how to deal with the drainage from the neighborhood and the commercial development.
I think to answer another sort of layer of that, we need to come to the homeowners association and work with you on that detention basin so that it can be designed for our mutual benefit. If I was you, I would say, okay, but we don't want to have any responsibility down the road for that detention bond anymore. And if you will agree to that, then we will work with you on it. I understand homeowners associations aren't well designed to go long-term maintenance on something that's off the property. So we're very cognizant of that. And, at some point in time, that discussion needs to be had. And we're basically going to come to you and asking if we can work with you rather than we're going to do it without you. So
I appreciate that.
Laura, it looks like there's.
Before you guys cut, sure.
Oh, no, we're not done yet.
Okay, good. Okay.
We'll let anybody who wants to talk. I just want to make sure, are you all done, or do you want to wait a little bit and ask some more questions, or I'm pointing as though.
There's two people that have had their hands up for quite a while.
Yeah, we have a couple of
Okay
questions.
with me asking somebody else to speak? Okay, nobody say anything. Tracy, did you have a question?
I do. So hi, my name's Tracy Mott, and I'm glad to be here at the meeting. I am probably one of the newest residents in Champion Heights. And my concern was mentioned about, I do back up to the proposed development area there, the commercial, soon to be commercial area. And I did do my research before I bought and built my house here, and it was C2, and I was very excited. I'm like, okay, I can handle 2 stories, right? Because it's not really going to look into my backyard. But if we start looking at C3, one of my concerns is now it looks like maybe is that a 3-story, if I'm correct? And if it's right behind my wall, which I have a beautiful sky view, instead I might have people like looking into my yard, and I might not have any sky view left. So that's a big difference for us backing up to the commercial area. And I'm just kind of wondering, is there a planned, I know there's certain required distances back from the fence from the residential, but any like plan to keep it like further out, or what's the plan there if it does go if we do end up doing the C3?
The difference between the C2 and the C3 is the C2 allows 30 feet in height and the C3 allows 40 feet. So you're correct, you know.
But the entrance corridor overlay also has a little bit of that. So the entrance corridor limits for 30 feet. And you do have to step back if you're gonna make it like taller. But that depends on how this is all end up.
Step back from the residential area, but it's step back from River Road. I know that. But what about-
Yes, it talks about stepping back from the street.
That's Sarah Seha Bennett, anybody's wondering.
Sorry.
She's one of the planners for the planning department. So Dan, can you answer if they're planning on providing some buffer other than what's required by the ordinance?
So at this point in time, all of those details we think are worked out in the plating process. Because no matter what, this will be, and we should have started with this too, I suppose, Laura, but this property will by necessity be platted and broken into commercial lots, whether it's C2 or C3. And in that process, it all comes back through the ordinance again. And I'm assuming that those adjustments and or requirements would be imposed at that point in time.
Right. I think the required setback other than entrance corridor, which is what what Sarah was talking about. I think it's 20 feet for commercial to residential. Do you recall, Sarah? The 10 or 20 feet.
No, so what I'm talking is about the dimensions for the entrance corridor. And it does have the buffer between residential and commercial. Let me just double check what the UDC has it, just a sec.
So the C2 in the UDC, the C2 has the same buffer as the adjoining residential. So that'd typically be 20 feet. And then the C3 has, I'm talking about rear yard setbacks, they're both 20 feet. So the official setback is the same for the C2 or the C3, which is 20 feet when you're talking about rear yards.
And that's a big, difference for someone like me that backs up for a 2-story versus a 3-story building. 20 feet's nothing off, so that would be a big concern of mine. And I would assume some of my neighbors as well, is the change from C2 to C3 with that. Otherwise, I'm on board with the Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. I would be really excited to walk down to Trader Joe's, but I'm not sure if they're going to go up to 20 feet or, at this point, I guess it's kind of hard to know what the plan is.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, with that concern, a lot of the C3 uses, as I previously stated, require a special use permit. With that, it will require a site plan. In that site plan, we can demonstrate what the buffers will be, and the neighborhood will get a little bit of a say on how much of a buffer they'd like to see, the height of the building they would like to see. It gives you guys a little bit more control than what you would have if something was developed as C2. And just requires the specific C2 setbacks.
Just an information that I found here, the questions about waste containers. So it is on a regulation that it needs to be located at least 50 feet from any residentially zoned property line. So they do have to comply with that for sure.
Right. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so I'm gonna just jump in because I've had my hand up for quite a while now. My name is Jake
I'm sorry.
Martinez. I back up, I'm in Woods of Bernie that is like the first lot north of the lots that back up to the western piece of the property. And the C3 is a no-go for me because of the height requirement. I understand that the developer has the right to develop their property. It's currently zone Z2, and that to me makes sense as as a transitionary type of property to a residential piece of property, right? So, and I understand the planning committee and the planning commission has to take everyone's interest to heart. But first and foremost is to protect the citizens, right? The residents. And we're already going to take a hit in property values for backing up to a commercial development. That's going to happen, right? And the people that bought property backing up to that should have gone in with their eyes open, knowing that. But to change it to a C3 is going to result in a bigger hit on our property values for the people that live along the western piece of property, that back up to the western edge of that property. And when they take a property hit, the houses next to those will take a property value hit. So to me, it's a no-go going to C3 specifically because of the height requirement. And I know we've heard a lot about the drainage and the townhomes, and those people were loudest at the library meeting. But I know people did speak up about protecting the people in the woods of Bernie that back up to this western piece of the property. And it seems like we're not getting any attention and any concern from the planning commission to protect our interests. And I think that's all I want to say. I appreciate you guys giving me the chance to say it.
But what was your name again? I'm so sorry.
Sure. My name is Jake Martinez.
Thank you.
I'm at 112 Massey Woods.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody else that has a comment or would like to ask a question?
Yeah, there's a few hands up, so.
Laura,
I
I have a
see them.
I have
Yeah.
a couple of questions.
Mr.
Bryce.
Bodie,
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Dan, thank you for being here. Russell and Delaney, thanks for being here and doing this bond meeting. These are very important in the city. I am the city council person for District 4. Laura, I have a couple of questions. Are we doing a development agreement in the future with this development or no?
Yes.
All right,
No.
it's not a part of this project. So a couple of things that were brought up about the drainage. I understand that Champion Heights is higher, but Champion High School is not. So I'm going to throw this out there. It's very important. Low impact development is part of what we do in the city, and we will get to that. I know y'all will get to that with stormwater runoff. But when we're talking about the detention pond, sharing that with Champion Heights, that runoff still goes out to 46. It all goes downhill. So just trying to keep that in the front of your minds. That's very important to the city council. It's very important to the planning department that stormwater runoff and low impact development, that impervious cover, whether it's a C2 or a C3, is going to happen. Night skies is something that's very important. So lighting is something that I know that we as a city want to see you guys follow. That I know that's coming in the future, but it's important to say it here too, and make sure that you guys are aware of those things that are important to city council too, and the citizens. And I want to go back to, we kind of mentioned at the very first of this meeting about restrictive covenants, Delaney, and y'all were talking about no apartments. And so Laura, it sounds like we have not done this before with a commercial development. Is that correct?
We have talked about it with another commercial development and ended up not doing that just because it got complicated as to who was going to be the other party.
Right. And so a lot of those questions, when we ask those questions, even in council, especially with a rezoning, my main concern is once we grant a C3 status, how do I know that these things are actually going to happen? So those restrictive covenants, especially since we don't have a development agreement, are going to be really important to answer those questions. Because Dan, I can trust you that you're going to say this, but once you sell that property, I have no idea what's going to happen there, especially with that zoning. I know what's going to happen within our control as a city, but I really do think that, especially since we don't have any kind of development agreement with this property, that's going to be important for the folks in Champion Heights and the Woods of Bernie to know that we've got that in some form or fashion. So I have no idea what that looks like, Laura. as a restrictive covenant, but I just want that to be out there. And thank y'all again for doing this bond meeting.
Hey, Bryce, can I ask you a quick question? Just a very quick one. Because I know there's been some,
This guy. Yes.
yeah, this is Guy, I'm
Right.
sorry.
That's all right.
I know there's some questions about the rezoning for the districts. Is Champion Heights was like this little finger that was sticking out. We used to be zone 2.
Correct.
Are we still 2 or have we changed now?
That's a great question. I think you are that finger that is in District 4 now. So am I right, Laura?
I looked before the
There's-
meeting because I understood that it was now your district, but I think
Yeah.
that finger is the Rittemann's property. That
Oh,
is in your
really?
district.
So
I went-
regardless, I still care about you because I showed up
Absolutely.
to your bond meeting and I am on city council. So I do
Yes.
care about what's going on with you. I will figure that out for sure, Guy, where that little finger north of 46 is actually in existence and whose district it is in.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'd like to point out one quick thing in response to your question, Councilman. Our position is that we are going to restrict the property against that particular use. And the technique that I've used in the past, and Delaney could probably speak to this as well or better than I can, is to have a restrictive covenant, and it's held, the beneficial interest holder is a known entity that will have continuity into the future. But if that's not the best way to do it in the city of Bernie or in Kendall County, then we will do it the other way. I mean, my point is that we are not doing a bait and switch here. It's all public. It's all on the record. We've sent it in a letter to everyone that we could. And we're not going to run from that, nor are we going to allow the future owner, if that's the case, to rewrite that.
Just
I
to speak
appreciate that.
a little bit more about restrictive covenants. Thank you so much, Mr. Councilman, for showing up today. So how the restrictive covenant would work is that we would enter into them with the current property owner, and then with potentially Champion Heights or the Woods of Bernie, or both, whoever really is interested in entering into them with us. We would hope to have those executed, at least executed, if not executed and filed before City Council, so that they are officially in the record. How they work moving forward is if the property is to sell or transfer, they attach to the land and move with the land. So the next property owner would be bound to them as well. And like I said, we would do everything in our power to make sure that they are executed and hopefully recorded before City Council.
Subject only to a successful C3 rezoning.
Yes.
So we've got a couple other hands raised. I see Lisa. Did you want to ask a question?
I have a couple questions. I actually put them in the chat. In the letter that we got, it talked about how you would say, solely occupied by 5 or more families. Does that also mean then that, fourplex and duplex are on the table still?
Yes, what we understood and have been working towards is to eliminate those, what we in the industry call garden style, the sort of every apartment project you've ever seen. If there's some clever for sale housing or some other version of things that fits in a scenario that's less than 5 families per building, we would still be able to pursue that. Yes.
Gotcha. And then my next question is, we talked about like the Trader Joe's or whatever. I look at the land and I think about a building. I have no clue. Like, I know you can't say this is where we're going to lay, but do you have any kind of like, hey, this is the size of this type of building, and this is what it would look like on the lot here? You could fit 6 different places. Do you have anything like that that could just show us, hey, this is, because I can't even figure, like, would it go before the road or after the road? Could it fit in both places? Could it fit on both sides, like all 4 places? Something that size.
I mean, I understand your question, and we have been reluctant to develop a site plan only because it's completely cartoon.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the market's going to determine those things, but the idea of seeing what an 18,000 square foot grocery store footprint looks like I'm sure we can come up with something like that.
I wouldn't
What
mind
I've
seeing that.
always done in that effect is I will take a building like puzzle pieces and have a little building footprint and the associated parking with it and move it around on the site until it kind of falls into a spot that makes sense, and then bring other things. But at this point in time, as long as everybody understands that it's completely speculative, but getting a sense of it, like for instance, an HEB would span from the woods of Bernie all the way over to the center line of this property where the street is. I mean, a physical building would take up that kind of space. So
Right.
these others are, you know, I think I heard before 118,000 square foot HEB versus an 18,000 square foot Trader Joe's.
I measured it real quick and I came up with 140,000. So he was pretty darn close.
I mean,
The
it's-
Walgreens, our Walgreens is about 18,000 square feet. If it gives you any ideas for his reference of building sizes,
How much did you say for Walgreens?
about 18,000.
Okay. I mean, that would just be neat to see, like, I don't have any concept, like, could it only be before the road? Could it only be after the road? Or, I mean, I guess it depends if it's long or square or.
Understand. I mean, I understand. It isn't the kind of information that we put out too early in the process because,
Mhm.
like I said, it's too easy for it to be misunderstood or misinterpreted. And you know, if there was a sit down meeting at some point, we can go through that process. It's not. I'm not trying to keep, you know, hold my hand and hold our cards, but
I'm sure somebody maybe here is good enough to pull a scale piece of our
Yeah, I'm
property.
trying to
scale
draw
thing.
something really quickly. So I can get
I have no concept of size.
fair enough. Completely understand.
Let's see if I can do something real quick.
And then I just put in the comments, like, for the rest of us to see, like, I did see that there's about, 7 things that could go C3 that can't go C2, that things that we need to consider. And then as well as a few things that could go with a special use permit in C3 that couldn't go C2, which was like the over 2 stories, which that one on office had to be approved. But, I guess that's my questions for right now. Thank you.
So I'm going to share my screen real quick and keep in mind, this is my super, oops, if I can do it, hold on. My super fast drawing skills here on my GIS map. If it'll come up. Here we go. Can you see it? So that's about 150,000 square feet on the lot. Okay, if I could turn it, I would, so it would fit on there better. But so you've got to keep in mind, this would be an HEB, square footage, a little bit larger, and then you've got to have parking and so forth as well. And then here's where that primary collector would come through. So I think something this big obviously wouldn't fit up front along River Road.
It would not fit anywhere, Laura, because the associated parking with that building
Exactly.
is the rest of the property. So it simply won't fit on this property. That is not a possibility.
So whereas 15,000, that's 50,000.
Yep.
Trying to find 18 for you. That's about 22,000 right here. So that'll give you an idea how many Walgreens could you have there if you were going to have Walgreens. Now Walgreens might fit up here.
Yeah, Walgreens is not going to be in the area in the backyard of the woods of Bernie because of the visibility goes away.
Yeah, they're going to want to be up on River Road.
It would be up next to those other commercial uses.
And they'd want to drive through as well. Does that give you any kind of idea, Lisa, what we're?
Yeah, that helps a little bit. And I don't know, I mean, I guess it'd fit on the other side also if, they got rid of some trees probably.
The little one, yeah.
Yeah.
Now this is a little more difficult just because you've got the detention pond on the north side of that primary collector.
Laura, can I ask a similar question? This is
Of course.
Cheryl. So that entryway from the businesses from the woods of Bernie, the barrier from those businesses that are here now to the entrance to that neighborhood, about how, just as a reference, how much demarcation and protection is that considered? Is that is that like a good example of what the restrictive covenants would be for the barriers?
Where were you talking about again?
Where so the Woods of Bernie, the businesses are up front and then
Oh,
you
the
have
commercial.
to the neighborhood. And when we were talking about places of demarcation, like where the barriers are, is that a good example of the distance?
So
between-
that's probably, this is about 40 feet right here.
Okay,
If you can see my little marker.
okay,
But there's about 40 feet of separation here.
okay.
And we don't have the buildings on my older map here, so I can't tell.
Okay.
Uh,
By that winding woods,
That's about 30.
okay,
I'm sorry, I'm pointing at my screen like you can see. Right here is about 30 feet of buffer. This looks like, this is probably 20 right here.
okay,
And then there's some little buffer in here. Oh, that's your yard. That's your side yard.
okay. Thank you.
You bet. Andrea, you had your hand up. Do you have any questions? Did I say it right? Is it Andre?
Hi. Everyone says it differently, so I kind of respond to anything, but it is Andrea.
Got it.
So I did have a few questions, a little bit for everyone here. So this one would go more towards Russell. So you had spoken about alleviating some of the traffic by expanding to Highway 46. And I'm trying to figure out how you would, like, what you have in mind as far as expanding it. I don't know if you've already conducted the traffic impact analysis, but if you can expand a little bit on how you're going to alleviate the traffic on Champion Boulevard, and then also when you build that thoroughfare connecting to Woods of Bernie, how that traffic is going to flow through there, because we are talking about Champion Heights, which is a little over 200 homes, Woods of Bernie, a little over 200 homes, and then depending on the outcome of the residential development, possibly another 200 homes.
Yeah, so a couple good questions there. I'll take the middle one first. We have not done a full TIA yet because we don't know what the eventual uses are going to be. We've done some preliminary calculations on estimated based on just general commercial uses, but it is very specific. As you can imagine, a Walgreens or a doctor's office, both may fit in C2, but have very different uses and different timings of those uses. So we don't have a final impact at this point, but I will say that Champion Boulevard was designed to be a divided thoroughfare, so 2 lanes going each direction. When Champion Heights was originally designed, we built half of that because that was what was required to service at the time the homes that were going to be there. This development would require us to build the other half. So what you would end up with is double the capacity of Champion Heights Boulevard up to the neighborhood. So we wouldn't do any work into the neighborhood, but up to the neighborhood. So you'd end up having 2 lanes going north and 2 lanes going south. So that's part of the requirements from the city of Bernie, from the major thoroughfare plan, and from adding commercial development here. As far as creating that east-west connector, there's some study that needs to go into that to give you specific answers, but the benefit is that right now you guys have a single point source, and so does Woods at Bernie, right? You have a single connection that everyone uses, and what it will allow is for uses going to different directions to move that direction, right? So instead of taking a right turn out and then immediately hitting a light, is more right turns will move that direction, and the folks from Woods at Bernie who want to take a left will move towards the east to go east on Highway 46. It's hard to speak to specific details but we would have to study that as a part of our requirements and provide access, whether that's additional turn lanes or other things on 46 to mitigate those. If we create those impacts, we have to work with the city of Ernie to mitigate them at any of those intersections.
There's one other sort of, and Russell, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. The way it looks to us and the way the major thoroughfare plan lines up, east and west of Champion Heights Boulevard would be controlled intersections at 46. And if I was coming in and out of my neighborhood, there's times when I don't want to use the traffic light. I'd rather just turn in or turn out, as the case were. So the way it looks to us at this point, we don't hit the warrants. They're called warrants to create a controlled intersection at Champion Heights in favor of those other two. One of them at the Trails of Herf Ranch, one of them at the Woods of Bernie. And I think it's good for everybody because the flow in and out of Champion Heights, Champion Heights Boulevard is now double the capacity. And there's 3 points of access to 46 instead of just one.
Okay. And I understand that. The concern too would be with the HERF development, the possibility of that even going forward.
I was talking about development that's already in place with the Trails of Herf Ranch.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, you had cut out a little bit before that, so sorry if I was talking over you. The other question is with regards to the 5 homes that were mentioned in the letter, what type of homes are you looking at, or is there a certain side, like what is it, these 5 homes that are referenced in the letter? I guess if you can expand on that.
So I think what we're talking about is there's a reference in there that says fewer than 5 families in any building. So it would be an attached, in this market these days, it's probably for sale townhomes, for instance, that would be under the Bernie rules that would be considered multifamily, right, Laura? Anything that's attached.
Not anymore. But
it's townhomes.
It's townhomes.
Yeah. What we were trying to make it clear is that the tradition, like I don't know what it's called, but across the street, wrapping the Valero, there's a multifamily apartment project. It's nice looking, but it's more apartments. What we're trying to make it clear is we're not going to do that. We're not even going to ask for a special use permit to do that. We're going to take it off the table now.
I think what he's trying to say is they're not going to build standard apartments at all. And the reason he references the 5 homes is he's trying to differentiate it from your standard multifamily, which is a typical apartment complex, versus a row of townhomes or duplex, attached dwellings, that sort of thing. I think he was just trying to differentiate between the two.
Okay, so this would be more along the lines of like the just one unit then with 5 homes, or a total of 5 of them then?
So the idea is that no residential building would have more than actually 4. I think the way we wrote the letter, what the restriction would be, no more than 5 individual residences in any building. No, I'm sorry, less than 5.
So it could be a 4-plex or a duplex.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
it could be a 4-plex or a duplex, which would be townhome.
Right. Okay. So no more than 5 families or per building or structure, I guess you could say, but you could have multiple units of those on this entire property. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then I know with and this might be more geared towards Russell, possibly, for the development on the east side of Champion Boulevard, the front 50% of the property being a floodplain, what is the owner's intentions with that portion within the floodplain?
Yeah, I mean, again, I appreciate the question. We don't, right now, we don't have any specific uses that are determined on any specific place. We have not done a full floodplain study to show that that can be removed from the floodplain. And in order to remove it, we would have to do that. If that was the owner's desire. At current, we don't have a plan to remove that from the floodplain. And again, we would have to mitigate any land in that area that we would remove from the floodplain to the point that it makes no impact. So to Councilman's point earlier and the discussion that we had at the library is, we can't negatively impact any of our upstream, downstream, or cross the stream neighbors. So if we do choose to bring any of that out of the floodplain, we're going to have to figure out a way to mitigate any impact to the floodplain. And right now we don't have a plan for that. I can't tell you that I've solved that challenge. We may be able to solve it in the future, but right now we have not, and we don't have an intention of fixing that yet.
Okay, so as of right now, because when I was looking at the elevation, it's about a 5-foot elevation from the back right corner or that right side of Champion Boulevard to even the front closest to Highway 46. It's about a 5-foot elevation difference, which I think may be off on that. But even if it's 8 foot, I mean, that's not a significant difference. Now, granted, we have that detention pond sitting, on the northern side of that property. So I'm trying to figure out how the owner intends to use that right side, because between the detention pond and the front end of the floodplain, there's not much room left.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the question. I'm going to unfortunately repeat myself here. We don't have a plan yet on how we're going to use that front right corner. I mean, the goal of the zoning is the balance of the entire property and how we're going to work with that property overall. So we haven't segmented out different sections of the property and which ones we're going to develop yet or how we're going to develop them. It's really the overall piece of property. But as I mentioned, we can't develop that piece of property without solving the problem you're asking. And to date, we haven't solved it. There are engineering solutions to do that, but it's not going to be a simple one. We're going to have to do a lot of work and get permitted through the city and the federal government to do anything on that front right corner. And as of today, we don't have the authorization to do that.
I want to go back to the multifamily real quick because I have a feeling where the number 5 came from, and Delaney, correct me if I'm wrong. But a lot of in our definitions in the Unified Development Code, it says anything more than 3 dwellings on a lot becomes multifamily. A lot of cities use 5 units on a lot as multifamily is their definition of multifamily. So I'm not sure, maybe that's where the 5 came from. I think, and just so everybody knows, multifamily, no matter how many, in a C2 or C3, requires a special use permit for a C2 or C3, even a C4 in this case. So multifamily, if they came back with multifamily for any of the zonings right now, they'd have to come back and get a special use permit. So to go through this process again, just so everybody's clear. I think what Dan's just trying to say is they don't plan to put a typical multifamily. I think they may consider some townhomes or something here. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Could be duplexes and so forth, but just so we're clear, it will require an SUP if they came back for multifamily. So y'all would all hear this again.
And even for townhomes, he would need to come back and request a special use permit. So it wouldn't be a very simple process. You guys would have another presentation about it.
Thank
But
you.
just to go hand in glove with that, as the development plan evolves, and if it becomes what I would call a cool place to live, we don't want to have no opportunity for someone to live there. What we're trying to make it crystal clear is we agree completely with the neighborhood that another damn apartment project is not the best use of this land, and we're trying to take that old style, old thought process off the table.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that for everybody. Andrea, did you have anything else? Did Russell answer your question thoroughly? You're frozen from my perspective. I don't know if you can hear us. If you want to try to get back in, we'll be here, I'm sure, for a few more minutes. But I don't hear you. I do see somebody's hand is raised, but I think it is still Jake, maybe. Not sure who that is. Now I see Jake down here.
No, I think it
There's
was Cheryl's.
It was from earlier, I think, Laura.
Okay, gotcha. Just
Yeah, I'm
make it.
good. Cheryl's good.
Okay, good.
I got my question. Thank you.
Just check.
Laura, this is Lisa.
Yes,
Boyd.
ma'am.
When I look at and I think I'm looking at the Unified Development Code, I see where like C2 and C3 is listed out, and it talks about like which are permitted and which is special use permit.
Right.
But I don't see, like I see 18 units, and
Right.
under, or 19 units and over, but I don't see anything that specifically talks about duplexes or townhomes or anything like that.
So they are,
Multi-tenant buildings says permitted.
So single family attached dwellings are townhomes.
so yeah, go down that list a little bit further. Attached or townhomes, detached or your typical single family. So in a
It's just-
C1, they're permitted. In a C2, they're a special use permit. They're not allowed at all, Dan, just so you know, in a C3, there's no permitted use for townhomes.
Guess I don't see it on the big document that I'm looking at.
So just below the multifamily, 18 units per acre or less,
Okay.
should be 1, 2, 3 down, single family. And
Yeah,
then
you
it
have-
says attached. Are you in a table?
Yeah, I'm going down back to the table. It
Yeah, that's
went back just a little bit slow.
That's okay. I understand. I'm gonna make sure that we didn't edit that and add townhomes in our latest and greatest update.
Because I read it a couple times and didn't see it, and I'm looking at,
It's just because it's called single family. So we consider townhomes, which are on individual lots, single family. They just happen to be attached. So we call them single family attached dwellings. It should be under residential use group, just before civic.
industrial,
And I'm gonna look for this other thing while you're looking for it.
civic, residential, single family dwelling attached.
That's it. That's,
Single
those are
family
townhomes.
Okay,
We probably should just call them townhomes because everybody knows what that is. That'd be too easy.
okay. So it's in C2, there's special permit, and then there's nothing for C3. So that means,
Which means it is not allowed. But
okay,
I'm gonna double check one thing, so I'm not lying to anybody. Because we just made some edits to the UDC, or we're in the process of making some.
Mhm.
Hold on one second. Sarah, I don't recall if that's one of the ones that we made a change to.
No, I don't think we did. So Andrea, you have question about the plating. And the plating doesn't change the zoning, so. Okay, one thing at a time, sorry. So if the land is platted and sold and the new landowner does not require SUP, how does that work? So the zoning keeps independent of the plating. So once it's zoned, it is. If he amends the plat and subdivide the lot, the zoning is still the same.
An SUP runs with the land, not the property owner. So if somebody were to come in and get a zoning and a special use permit, that sticks with the property. So anybody that would come in after them, let's say they sold it, and that person doesn't want to do the same plan as the previous, then they'd have to come back and ask for permission again. Hopefully that makes sense.
She also had a question about the overlay, the corridor, entrance corridor overlay. And I don't know what you mean by PDD. Also, does it have a PDD? I don't know
It's
what
a
that means.
planned district development. It's
Yes.
essentially a site plan that's, so next door to this, there are some, we'll call it multifamily that is planning on coming in. That's a PDD. And it's a site plan essentially that is locked into the development. It can include some uses, some use restrictions. There are a lot of conditions you can put on a PDD, but it shows placement of buildings, streets, setbacks, landscaping even. It just depends on what detail you get into.
Just to answer that question, there's not a planned development district on the property. They aren't at a time right now where they have it planned out well enough that they have specific buildings that are going to go on the property to create the PDD. That's not to say that a site plan in an SUP won't limit basically what a PDD does in the future.
And I was going to mention that earlier because we were talking on ways to regulate, and the PUD, which planned unit development, it's just a smaller scale version of a PDD. That's a way to do it. But when, for instance, Dan's got one individual that's interested in developing the site for potentially a grocery store, but he doesn't have a plan for the rest of the site. So you really can't do a PDD or PUD in this case because he doesn't know what else is going to happen there. So really the restrictions, I'll call them deed restrictions just to be simple. That's probably the most efficient way, not knowing what else is going on there, to do it right now because he doesn't have a plan. If he did, I'm sure he'd be showing us.
Yeah, I think my question was more of the willingness, well, of the owner to later on, you know, I know we're at the beginning phase right now, but the willingness to go into either the PUD or the PDD, and that was more of what I was looking at.
So that usually does occur with the zoning. Wouldn't stop him from doing it in the future, but typically we see it at zoning.
Yeah, Andrew, that's a great
thank
question.
you.
I can't speak to the owner directly on his beliefs, but I do think that would be addressed later on in the process, whether it be through an SUP, which would have a site plan, basically along the same lines as a PDD or a PUD, which you guys would be able to have a say in. We'd have this whole process all over again. We'd have meetings with you guys. We go to planning and zoning and city council, and we would be effectively limited to just what's in the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
And I have one more question, Laura. When I look at this table for the residential use, it looks like in C2 and C3, the only things that are allowable in either zone would be an assisted living facility, a live work unit, which I'm assuming that's where he's kind of talking about if they have some commercial and have some houses on top
Right.
of it, or a nursing home. But otherwise, regular houses, townhouses, duplex, or apartment complexes, unless you have a special use permit.
That's correct.
So
Okay.
based on the overlay district, you're still going to need a special use permit if you're going for a nursing home or a residential care facility.
So the overlay that Sarah's talking about is along River Road. There's actually an entrance corridor that comes into Bernie, and it also, she's more familiar with it than I am, but it can regulate uses as well. It's not just about design and landscaping and screening, which is, you know, originally what we wrote it for, but now it actually can limit uses. So if Sarah says that's correct, then that is correct. But you're right about the list. What you're reading is what I've got, even on the updated one.
Okay, so we aren't looking, I think that's one of our concerns is, you know, one of the major concerns is, oh my gosh, are we going to do C3 and then get apartments or townhouses? But it looks like we can't.
Not without more permission.
Okay.
And not townhouses.
And we're taking off, we're going to restrict even the opportunity to go look for a special use permit on a building that would house more than 5 families.
Dan, I think you're restricted on that anyway, based on what the table says. That's what she's correct. You can't even have townhomes in there.
Well, but we can do, under a special use permit, we can do apartments, which is what we're trying to be clear about.
Yes.
We're going to restrict against. So
So
someone
if you
beyond
restrict
us
it,
in the future can't come
Yes.
in there and undo what we're talking about.
correct.
We definitely appreciate that.
Great. Andrea, I still
Dan,
see your
if
hand up.
Oh, oops, sorry. I did have a question for Dan. If we do not agree, and this is just hypothetical, I mean, everything in this discussion has been, but if we do not agree with the townhomes, is that the intent? Like, would you guys intend on requesting a special use permit to build multifamily at that point?
So the point that we are trying to clarify is, if we're successful with the C3 zoning, that we will take garden style apartments off the table, so you all don't have to worry about that use. That makes sense.
And if you don't get your C3, yes.
If we don't get the C3, then it's, you know, it falls back into what the UDC provides for.
So Andrea, they could, if they
Thank you.
wanted to, with an SUP, they could come back and ask for multiple units on a lot, whether they are townhome style. I think what Dan is saying, he doesn't want to do typical apartments or multifamily there. Regardless, either way, they have to come back with an SUP.
Andrea, to also
Okay.
kind of talk to that a little bit more, I think he is providing that just as like a little bit of extra comfort, not to say that if we don't get the C3, he's gonna come and do that. He was just providing it as a comfort level, since we don't know exactly what will be on the property. We wanted to take away what we heard from everyone that they definitely didn't want to see on the property.
Understood. Yeah. And we have people, you know, we have a lot of people in here that are on both sides of the fence. So I just want to make sure we have answers for everyone on what the intent kind of is going forward. So I appreciate that.
Great. Is anybody, I don't see any other hand. I see a Janine. Have we answered your questions?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Can't see me though, right?
I cannot see.
Sorry.
You're safe. That's all right.
I have kind of a different question regarding the traffic that's on 46. And so far, it appears to me that there's been nothing figured out on how to deal with all of the trucks and everybody that's using 46. And the amount of traffic that is created because of that. And then with Champion High School, right at the corner here of Woods of Bernie, I live in Woods of Bernie. At school times, I don't know if you've been right in this area at school time, but between all of the large trucks and traffic, and then everybody wanting to get into the high school and out, I'm just concerned about just like next door, building some more commercial property that's also going to bring more traffic, especially if it's like a Trader Joe's and a Walgreens and those types of things. So I'm just curious to know where the thought process is on that.
So I'll speak real quickly and then I'm gonna let Russell jump in there because I know he's got answers as far as traffic. This, I mean, that's the $1 million question and it always comes up and I get it. I've been over there when school lets out and it's a nightmare for anybody at any time of, well, especially during school time. So you're correct. I get it. I will tell you, 46 obviously is a major thoroughfare coming into Bernie and it is true, and somebody said it, and I know it for a fact that the GPS will now take you from 35 down 46 through Bernie to get to I-10. I mean, it's becoming the cut through.
Yeah.
But the city knew this was coming years ago, and so we have plans in place, and it's our thoroughfare plan. But it doesn't happen overnight, and it's kind of like puzzle pieces. It comes together when development happens, and it's a piece at a time. We got a little bit of it when Woods of Bernie was built. That one section there, we'll get a little bit from Dan and his group when they develop this site. We'll get a little bit if and when the neighbor ever develops, and it will take it. You know, that's just a little piece of it. We've got a north-south connector. We've been trying to address the issues with traffic for years. I mean, Kendall Gateway is an ugly word. It's a dirty word around here now, but really that was an effort of the TxDOT was working with us, trying to accommodate, you know, where can traffic go to get it around Bernie, meaning off of River Road and onto I-10 without it coming past y'all. So, you know, we've been trying for years to address it. We do have a thoroughfare plan in place. It's you know, I get that it's painful while you're waiting for all this stuff to come together, but that's just kind of how things actually work, is we have developers pay for it instead of, you know, putting it on the backs of the citizens. So as development comes in, if they create any kind of traffic, then we ask that they construct these roads that relieves a little bit of the traffic as we go along, and then eventually it all comes together. You probably still have traffic, but it's better. Yeah. It's better, and it should flow better. We have a route on our thoroughfare plan right now that goes all the way from Adler, comes down through Esperanza, all the way through Ranches at Creekside down to South Glen and on to I-10. That's our thoroughfare. But we won't get it until the development happens, because the city's not in the business of going in and building highways. We'll build sections of roads where there are pieces missing, but you know, that's what we do. We plan for it so that development can build it.
And unfortunately, that doesn't really take care of the problem for years.
Doesn't help you for years. You're right. No. But a little piece at a time. Russell, you want to answer kind of more specifically about this development and how what the impact will do?
Yeah, Janine, thank you for your question. I'll first say that Laura did a good job of talking about the regional items, and the councilman also included in the chat an opportunity for you guys to get involved in the regional traffic conversation, which is the other thing I was going to mention is this has been a complicated and difficult conversation for many communities to look at the regional traffic issues. And it's just something that takes a lot of effort and unfortunately time to solve. As far as our development and what we impact on Highway 46, the difference between C2 and C3 zoning and the impact that those have from a traffic standpoint are almost identical. And obviously the uses that we're going to put in there are going to drive exactly what that final traffic number is going to be. We do need to mitigate it as a part of the Bernie code. We have to, and there's also a state law about that as well. So we have to find solutions to try and help the traffic as best we can. Unfortunately,
can I just say something quickly?
Yes,
I just wanted to make a comment real fast about Almond Road and what they've tried to do to help the traffic there. They've made it extremely dangerous. when you come out of Almond Road and try to get on I-10, making a left-hand turn, you
46.
onto 46, you are thrown suddenly into the fast lane of traffic. And fixes like that, just, I don't know who to even talk to about it, because it just creates danger. I mean, I've had to go through that, So I don't know what you think about those kind of things. I worry about quick fixes.
That's certainly not ideal. It was a text dot Band-Aid, trying to fix that area there. I don't know if it's worse than it was. It was pretty bad before. But obviously
it's worse
that's not
because
ideal.
a light is now telling you may make a left-hand turn. And when you make your left-hand turn, well, then you're thrown directly into the fast lane of traffic coming down. There's no warning for the people hauling into town that are going 50 miles an hour. There's nothing that says, hey, you've got a lane merging in to a fast lane on 46.
Yeah, that's definitely not an ideal intersection. I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to that specifically. I can tell you that we already have better infrastructure at this intersection than what you're describing there at Ammon. I'm familiar with the fix. I do drive that way into town as well, so I am familiar with what you're describing. But we already have better infrastructure with a 4-lane road with divided center turn lanes, and any impact that we have to that, we'll have to work to mitigate. So the biggest thing that we can do is through our development is expand the roadway into 46, check on those warrants and what happens at the intersection, provide improvements to mitigate, and then make sure we have those east-west connectors to try and spread out the traffic. But the biggest thing at our particular development is whether we do C2 or C3 development, the amount of impact of traffic is going to be very, very similar. So this zoning decision doesn't impact that as much as the future SUP conversations and uses that are going to go in when those come in. And like everyone has said at the beginning, there's not the capacity for one of these big box mega user massive traffic generators there. It's going to be more regional commercial that's focused on the area right around there, as opposed to something that's going to drive traffic from all over the area. So those are my answers there. I from a regional standpoint, I mean, we just don't have the impact or the ability to study the whole region with our project, but it is something obviously the councilman encouraged you guys to get out and help with, and Laura did a good job of explaining some of those concerns as well.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Does anybody else have any questions? Dan, did you want to close us out?
I always love the opportunity to first and foremost thank everybody for taking a big chunk out of their evening. I also, Laura and I have known one another for a very long time. I'm very interested and always open to discussions like this. Collectively and creatively, we can come up with the best answers. We want to be clear that C3 versus C2 is trying to get back some of what we had 6 months ago. We're not trying to overbear the neighborhood or the situation. We're all seasoned veterans on our side, and we're not going to end up with creating a nightmare or exacerbating one. For instance, the grocery store that we heard about the other day on the 1670 River Road, the number well over 5,000 trips from a grocery store. We don't have that grocery store. We're not proposing that grocery store. It's not possible to build on this property. There isn't a 5,700 trip per day generator that we could put on this property. So things like that we need to filter those out. We need to help everybody understand that the difference between C2 and C3 from a traffic generation standpoint is nominal. And again, if I lived in Champion Heights, if I lived in the woods of Bernie, if I lived east of this intersection, the opportunity for me to go get my groceries. And again, the groceries is the best example I have. For me to get my groceries there instead of having to work my way across Bernie, regardless of the time of day, I see as a tremendous benefit to my life, my personal lifestyle. And most of the people that are coming from off campus or off property to this will enter and exit in a way that they don't interrupt the lifestyle of Champion Heights or the Woods of Bernie. They're not going to be going into the neighborhoods. So I think that's it for me. I want to be clear that we're trying to take what we consider to be a potentially obnoxious use off the table, and however it needs to be done, we're committed to getting that done.
Great, thank you, Dan. I do want to let everybody know this meeting is recorded. Council members watch it, the Planning and Zoning Commission watches it. They'll hear all their questions, all the answers tonight. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at which this item is being considered is February 7th. You'll have another opportunity. We will post this as a public hearing. You'll have an opportunity to speak at that meeting. And then it will go to council for another public hearing where you'll have another opportunity to speak on, let me double check my dates here, make sure I'm not lying to anybody. Let's see, February. City Council.
So February's meeting is going to be, if this item goes to the February P&Z, it's going to go to the City Council on March 8th and March 22nd.
Thank you. March 8th would be the City Council public hearing where everybody will have a chance to speak again. So still more time to talk. I know they've committed to some things that they plan to have done by council. So you could be watching for that. And Dan, folks are asking if we can share your email.
Yeah, I sent my email in that. I'm more than happy to coordinate any sort of meeting with you guys. And I can copy Dan into that. And we can, I know Guy had emailed me today, so I have Guy's email. And I can email you guys in the morning and look at some dates and when we can set that up.
Great.
Oh, one other real quick thing, Laura. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I also let everybody know I don't live out of town, and I'm not new to town. I moved here in 1996 to raise my family. We raised 4 boys here. We were the tree ordinance, which Laura will also tell you, before there was a tree ordinance on one of the developments that I spearheaded. So we, I think, have done our best to be good citizens, and that's not going to change.
Thank you, Dan. It's a good way to close it. I appreciate everybody's time tonight. Let us know. I think everybody's probably got Sarah's email as well. Y'all can find mine on the website also. So let us know if you have any other questions. We can share Delaney and Dan's contact information with you as well if you have any questions of them. Thank you, Bryce. It's good to see you. And y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all. Thanks a lot.
Okay. That's one. This one is going to be nosed. Let's leave and hope for the best.